So since the last time I was giving this class, I traveled to Canada and the United States for a couple of weeks. It was great seeing family. It's greater to be back. Very, very nice, a great trip, but it's good to be home. And if you remember the last time I was trying to teach the class, I also had problems with the computer. And in the meantime, meaning yesterday, I bought a new one. So tonight's the first time I'm using it for Zoom. Hopefully it works. And we Shalom Al Yisrael. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go back to the beginning of Perek Chet of chapter 8, because I kind of ran through the last few minutes of the last class, the last 10, 15 minutes of class. I read a whole bunch of stuff. And so we're going to come back to it next time. So that's why I will just kind of go through it again, start from the beginning of chapter 8. I'll put the text on the top of the screen in a minute. We'll look at this. We'll look at the text. I'll give a general description and understanding. Then we're going to go back and listen to a little bit of Rav Steinsaltz and Zatzal and Rav Ginsburg as well. Not a problem. Thank you. This is an HP. I was going to ask if the camera's better. I hope it is. Sounds good. And anyone who does need to leave for Mincha, obviously, I know the timing's not so great this time of year. Soon we're going to run into Marav issues, so we'll deal with that when it comes up. Okay. So let me put this on the screen. Okay, I'm picking up at the beginning of Perek Chet once again. And I'm going to translate some of the things that may be a little unclear, so I will be coming back as we go through it to explain. At the end of the last chapter, Perek Zayin, a lot of it spent on the idea of what happens to us when we eat something or do something, machshava, dibur, maaseh, thought, speech, and action, or eating, exercising, etc. And we didn't have the right intention. It wasn't asur, it wasn't prohibited, but it wasn't with the in mind. We're doing it for the reason of serving Hashem. So we say that goes down, so to speak, in its level to the gimel klipot tmeot, but it's able to be brought back up to a full level kedusha in the way of, for example, we'll use food again, that when a person ate and he washed, he benched, he said he ate the right foods and everything else, nothing not kosher, but he didn't have the right intention. But then as a result of having the stronger constitution as a result of the meal, he then says, okay, now I'm going to serve Hashem. I'll learn, I'll do whatever it is. As a result of that, then that person is able to uplift that eating or whatever the action was to a much higher level of kedusha. Now we're going to talk about the flip side. What about if a person eats something not kosher? And that not kosher food is what we call, again, gimel klipot hatmeot, something that cannot be made. You can't, what is it, the expression is you can put a lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. So let's read this. This is also furthermore a situation we have to deal with when it comes to non-kosher food. The reason they're called asur means, we talked about this before, that it is connected. Asur means attached to something, like matir asurim is a person who is a captive. We talked about this before, that asur doesn't just mean in English prohibited, but also means it's connected. What does it mean connected? It's connected to sitra achra, it's connected to gimel klipot tmeot, and therefore it is in a state that cannot be rectified. If a person were to eat some food that was not kosher, but nevertheless, when he ate it l'shem shamayim, meaning I'm eating this non-kosher food. I'm eating McDonald's, it's not kosher. That happens to be not kosher. But I still, afterwards, I'm going to have more strength and I'm going to serve Hashem. Some warped logic, but maybe a person does that. And he thinks in mind, lavod Hashem b'choach achilahi, to have in mind that to serve Hashem with the strength he's gotten from that food. V'gam pa'al v'asake, and he also acted on it. V'kara v'hitpalel b'choach achilahi, and he sat and he davened, and he learned and he davened as a result. Let's make up a situation. The person's very tired, they're hungry, they have no koach, and they say, okay, it's fine. I'm not the best Jew in the world. I'll just stop and have this non-kosher food. They eat it, and after they say, "Ooh, okay, I feel better, but I don't really feel good about what I just ate. Let me try to fix that. I'm going to go learn Torah now. I have strength." the chiyut rather, the life source that potentially is reawakened with something when it's mutar. You ate it for the wrong reason, but it wasn't, but it can be uplifted to kedusha. That does not happen when you eat something not kosher. Why? It is stuck inside of this thing called the sitra achra, which remember we said is anything that's not kedusha, but it's even to the lowest level of non-kedusha, that's gimel klipot hatmeot, the most lowest level of possible tuma. And therefore you cannot do anything with it. Let's say, for example, I have a pen that has a cap. And I take the pen, it's not necessarily a great example, but I'm just going to pop it in my head. I take a pen with the cap and I try to write with the cap on it. Well, obviously it's not going to do anything. But if I take the cap off and I try to write with it, then it works. But what if someone glued that cap on? I can try all I want to write and have all the good intentions, doesn't do me any good. So in a sense, what's happening when a person eats something non-kosher, there's no option, no ability for that to be rectified to serve Hashem with that. Even quote unquote, if it was only an isur d'Rabbanan, something that was prohibited from the rabbis. Because we have a principle that something that is prohibited by the rabbis, that's prohibited by the rabbis is in a sense sometimes more problematic even and more in isur than the words in the Torah. Therefore, right over here. This is a little, we mentioned this briefly last time. It's a little strange, I'll explain it. That when a person has a Yetzer Hara to do something they're not supposed to do, eat something they're not supposed to eat, and this power that's driving them to do this for things that are prohibited, it's being driven by, I'll just translate the words now, a demon that is not Jewish. That we will, in a sense, channel, a very bad word to use, but I'll use it just as an example, channel the Yetzer Hara, or the shade, this demon of the non-Jewish world that will feed our Yetzer Hara to do something which is asur. Meaning that when we have a Yetzer Hara to do something that we shouldn't do, that's based on the idea of the shade or the demon of the Yetzer Hara of the non-Jew coming to us. We'll see what this means a little later. However, what about when I sit down to eat and I don't have any intention whatsoever l'shem shamayim? Well, this therefore means I'm only eating because I want to feed myself. There's nothing to do with God. There's a sense of Yetzer Hara in that too, but that's the Jewish Yetzer Hara. Why? We already saw that if I did something that is permitted, but I didn't do it for the right reason, I didn't do it l'shem shamayim, I'm able to re-elevate or elevate it back to a level of kedusha, and therefore it's on the level playing field of the non-Jewish Yetzer Hara that attacked me or influenced me. But if I ate something, I just ate before the class. Did I sit there and think, oh, I'm going to be able to have some good strength now to teach the class because I didn't sleep well last night? Maybe in passing, I hope. And therefore, maybe I was able to elevate that food. But let's assume I didn't. So that until I do something about it and say, okay, look, I did eat. I feel good because I ate. And now I'm going to use that energy to teach this class. I have elevated that food from glimul klipot tmeot to kedusha. I had a Rebbe in 9th grade. He should have refuah shlema. He had a stroke a few years ago. He's not been the same. That, as is true by many 13 and 14-year-olds as they are in high school, they don't appreciate necessarily what they have. And this teacher, who later in years became a colleague, he was a rabbi of a shul who basically built an empire in Chicago, Chicago Torah Center for Torah and Chesed, which truly is an unbelievable organization. He was my 9th grade Rebbe. And he had pithy statements. I'll give you one, has nothing to do with this. And then you'll see why I'm mentioning there was at that time, this was 1972, it was still legal to have advertisements for cigarettes. And there's one cigarette in particular where the advertisement is some people sitting around a fire in their home, like a fireplace. And they're smoking, they have cigarettes in their hand. And the tagline is the art of lingering. And he went nuts. What do you mean the art of lingering? That's not what we're here for in this world. We're here to serve God. Just such a goyish thing. So that became things. You ask anybody who grew up my age in that school and had him as a rabbi, they'll know the Frum Yetzirah, which I would come to, the Frumer Yetzirah, the art of lingering. It's just like this whole long list of things that he said that years later came back into my head that some really made sense. And one example, for those of you who remember the United States, there was a move in the 70s that most Jewish institutions, I mentioned this in other classes, had in front of them Save Soviet Jewry, because that was the big Soviet Jewry time. And the tagline at the bottom was, let my people go. And he hated that. Why? Because you're missing the point. He says, you're missing the last line, the last word, which is V'ya'avduni. Freedom for freedom's sake is not freedom. Freedom to serve Hashem is freedom. He wanted those signs all to say, Shalachet ani v'ya'avduni. Obviously, they didn't change any of the signs. But years later, I'm still hearing that in my head. Why am I mentioning all of this? Because he taught us the concept of what's called the Frumer Yetzirah. What do you mean the Frum Yetzirah? Is but it tricks us into saying, you know what? I'm not going to go to the shir I was supposed to go to tonight. Why? Because look, I'm really tired. I'll probably fall asleep. It's better I get some sleep so I can get up in time for minyan. Well, you can do both. You can go to the shir. You can maybe even fall asleep. And then you go to sleep later and still get up in time for davening. No, it tricks us. Speaking of that, I'll tell you also another beautiful story. I read a similar story recently, but it's not as good. There was a true story. I forgot. It was told. I forgot which city. I think it was in Brooklyn. This took place. There was a man who would go to a Daf Yomi shir. He would come home from a very long, hard day of work, and he was absolutely exhausted. He ate a meal, and then he would go to shul, and where there'd be a Daf Yomi shir. And every single day he came into the shir, he opened his Gemara, put his head down, and he fell asleep. Every single day. So finally, after months and months and months of this, someone asked him in the shir, I don't understand. What are you coming to the shir for? All you do is you come here and sleep. He says, you're right. I really tried. The words penetrate me, I hope. But what's important for my kids to see is that after a long day of work, I make the attempt to still go out for that 1 hour for Daf Yomi shir. Maybe I sleep, maybe I don't sleep, but I got to go out there because they need to see that chinuch in the house. And that's really what this is about also, is taking something that we take for granted, something as simple as going to learn, something as simple as eating a meal, something as simple as whatever it might be, and elevating it to a different level. Now, what happens when a person did something, they ate something that wasn't, I'm going to try to scroll this down a little bit. A second, I'm still getting used to this. Here. Let me see, where was I here? Okay, right here, it says ach. No, sorry, v'gam. Right here. Now, when I did eat that item that did not have any special kedusha, it was sitra acha because I didn't have eating the shem shemayim. Okay, later on, I did elevate it by saying, now I want to be able to teach because I have the power from the food that elevates it. But there's still something on me. There's still a stain, so to speak, on the neshama, in the body, because there was something there for a period of time that was not okay. Let's take a look. Even afterwards, even after I've elevated it for the proper, I had in mind later to do, using the energy from that food to do something positive for Hashem. The impression, the mark, is still left on a person from what they had done. Because what happens, we've already discussed this in the last chapter, that as soon as somebody eats something, that food, whatever's not wasted from the body, is absorbed into the body, into the bloodstream, into the muscles, into the sin, everything into our body becomes a part of us. Therefore, since it made its mark on us, and I think I gave the example last time. Let's say you had, I'll give you a really good example. My granddaughters were playing around blueberries today. Not playing, they had some in the cup. My daughter was making blueberry pie or cake, and she'd given a few blueberries in the cup to the kids, and it's all over their hands, it's all over their face. And I came over there and I saw their hands were all blue. It was all beautiful, wonderful thing. I mean, they weren't playing with the food, just it got all over them. So a person can wash it, scrub it, but there's still a stain. There's still something there. So what happens? What does it has to happen to the neshama, to the physical body, in order for that stain of that food, of that action, and machshava, dibur, and maaseh, which we're going to talk about, how does that get cleansed? And again, this is, I ran through this last time, so I'm doing it slowly, and then we're going to go back with the commentaries. Lachein, therefore, tzarich haguf lechibut hakever. The first thing is that the body needs to go through something called chibut hakever, which I'm going to not really translate other than to say right now, it's something that bad that happens within the grave after the person passes away, obviously. What's its purpose? Linakoto, to cleanse him and to purify him mitumato from its spiritual uncleanliness, shekibel, that the body received. Remember, we said that even though they may have raised this back up to a level kedusha, nevertheless, there was an absolute impact on the body, again, in a spiritual sense and somewhat in the physical sense, because it became a part of us, even though it was driven by the Jewish Yetzer Hara, even though we did somehow raise it up to a level kedusha, but there's still this film, so to speak, that's left behind. So what happens? Whoops. So I told you still, I'll get used to this. Let me make this a little smaller. There. Who does not need chibut hakever? Anyone who did not have any hana'ah, any benefit from anything in this world without having some measure of l'shem shamayim involved. They ate, they slept, they exercised, there was the music, whatever it is, but absolutely everything involved was involved somehow in the machshava, dibur, maaseh, everything. It was all done l'shem shamayim. And he gives the one example, and that was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the man who is the editor of the Mishnah. We know that he said he held up his 10 fingers as he lay on his deathbed and said he promises before God they were supposed to, like, so to speak, be his witnesses, that not even his pinky had any benefit from anything in this world, in spite of the fact that he was an extremely wealthy man. He had no benefit from this world, not any benefit at all, but he had no benefit from which he did not have some l'shem shamayim aspect, something in mind for Hashem when he was doing it. Someone like him, says the Baal Tanya, does not need to go to chibut hakever. Let's see if I can do this without messing this up. I guess it's the next slide. Yeah. So the first thing we say is, the first step, so to speak, is somebody who may have eaten something, not l'shem shamayim, who may have. Almost everyone, there's probably not a person alive that does eat everything that's and have in mind l'shem shamayim. They would go through chibut hakever. Okay, that's part one. I have to look at my book. What about a person who doesn't know? Even Amaretz, person has no idea they should be doing anything l'shem shamayim. Person who wasn't raised with a good Jewish education. A person who was raised with a Jewish education, but never understood or even was told you really should think l'shem shamayim when you do something. Even such a person, gam kain, also tzarich letaher nafsho mitumah zo deklipa zo. He has to also, I'm over here, he has to also cleanse himself as well from this klipa. In other words, he didn't even uplift it. In other words, maybe a person had the idea afterwards they're going to uplift it, it left the stain. But a person who did and didn't have any consideration afterwards to uplift it to level kedusha, there's more than a stain, there's something deeper. They have to go through something, gilgula bekaf hakel. You'll see the words over here. Gilgula b'kaf hakela, right? See that? We're going to explain that in a little while. It has to do with something which, again, I mentioned real quickly last time, has to do with something, you know, I'll read two opinions of the person's neshama being thrown from one end of the universe to the other. It sounds a little strange, a little weird, maybe even a little creepy, but you got to hang in there. And he gives a source where he says this from. So the first thing is the things that were done not l'shem shamayim, they weren't asur, but they were not l'shem shamayim, but they got raised up. Chibut hakever, something that happens in the grave. Step number two was something that wasn't raised up at all, because either they didn't know or they just didn't do it. That requires kaf hakel. The third step, aval diburim asurim, person who speaks things they shouldn't say. Kamolei tzanud belashon hara v'chiyotze behem stam shtuyot, or worse, lashon hara. Shen mishalosh klipot atmeot legamrei. When you person speaks lashon hara, it is one you can't fix that. It is 100%. Gimel klipot atmeot, en kaf hakela levado mo'il letaher ula'avir mitumato me'anefesh. The kaf hakela, for sure, chibut hakever, and not even the kaf hakela, which again we'll explain soon, will not cleanse that person's neshama. They have to go down to Gehinnom, which we call in English hell. And it's going to surprise you. I will bet you everyone who hears me right now and everyone who will hear this later, when you picture Gehinnom, you picture, as the expression goes, hellfire and brimstone. Hot, really hot. I had a friend in Shalavim who told me that after 120 years, I still remember to this day, says he wants to be buried in a pair of short pajamas and a fan, because he knows it's going to be very hot where he goes. So you're going to be surprised. Listen to this. What about a person who is able to learn? We're not talking about a person who can't learn. We're not talking about a person who never understood that they're supposed to learn. We're talking about a person who knows they're supposed to spend time learning Torah, but instead wastes time. Guilty is charged a lot. And the kaf hakela alone will not help that person to cleanse him. Now, as we're talking about the first over here, we're talking the top, person who doesn't know. Now we're talking a person who knows, and they still waste their time. That won't be helped by the kaf hakela. It is specifically, we're going to see, he uses the word onash, which means punishment, severe punishment on bitul Torah. And we're going to see, hopefully still tonight, that when I use the word punishment, it's going to be in quotes, and you'll see why soon. Not only is a person going to get punished with the standard version of Gehinnom, of the supposed fire, but also this concept of Gehinnom shel shelek, the hell of snow. The heck is that? I mean, the hell of snow. It's exactly, I mean, you know, what does that even mean? How you, as explained elsewhere. Okay, so I'm not going to explain this one yet, because we have a lot to unpack here, as they say. We have to go back, and we have to start looking at some of these comments from Rav Steinsaltz, and I'll throw in a little bit of Ginsburg as well. And to understand what's really going on, let's take a look. I have to make this a bit smaller now. Okay. Actually, this one I explained already. I don't have to do this slide. To the next one. See how fast that was? Okay. It tells us here that the Yetzer Hara, for things that a person is not allowed to have, not a Yetzer Hara for things they may have, but things they're not allowed to have, comes from the Shedim Nuchrain, or the non-Jewish demons. Let's take a look. The Yetzer Hara that brings a person to do things they're not supposed to do. What does that mean? Shade min hashadim hagoyim. A shade, a demon. Again, we're talking spiritual right now, from the non-Jewish world. Lomar shed shel goyim, a demon from the non-Jewish, from the non-Jews. What does that mean, or what does that? He explains. Shu yetzara shel umot haolam. It's the Yetzer Hara that Hashem gave to the other nations of the world. Shenafshotehem mishlosh shalosh klipot hatmeot, which are their neshama, also the shalosh klipot hatmeot. We dealt with this in the very first chapter also. Why is it shalosh klipot tatmeot? Because a non-Jew, unless they become a ger, a convert, can never elevate themselves to kedusha. Kedusha is left in the Jewish world, so therefore they're stuck, as it were, in the gimel klipot tatmeot. Hayetzer hashoef bara, the yetzer, the desire that's drawn to evil. Shemishalosh klipot tatmeot, rak shein lo tikkun, rak shein lo tikkun. It is an evil that has no rectification. It can't be fixed. That kind of yetzer, shayach lu'umot ha'olam, is related to, so to speak, to the non-Jewish world. Shenafshotehem avhen mishalosh klipot tatmeot. Lu'umat zot, on the other hand, Yisrael shenafsham habahamit hi miklipat noga. We know that our nefesh habahamit, our animal soul, we already said this many, many times, has a klipat noga, which means, again, that it's not a good thing necessarily, but it has the ability to be good. Gam hara hashayach lahem hu hara shemiklipat noga sheyesh lo tikun. In that situation where I eat, not l'shem shamayim, I go exercise, but I'm not having l'shem shamayim. It was not l'shem shamayim, but I can taken. I can fix that. Mahut Yisrael hi atikun. What is us? What is permissible to us? What we're allowed to do always can be fixed. What is prohibited to us cannot be fixed. Not from, at least when I say fixed, it means it cannot be raised to a level of kedusha. It doesn't mean a person, a Jew, can't sin with something prohibited. Obviously, he can. Even maybe more than a non-Jew. Even with a starkness of doing it more. Listen to what he says. This is Rav Steinsaltz saying this. He said that when a person does something, a Jew does something they're not supposed to do, and we're not talking about things you're allowed to do but didn't have the right intention. Things you're not allowed to do. Whether he spoke Lashon Hara, ate treif, or worked on Shabbat. What he's doing at that moment, he's acting as a non-Jew and not as a Jew. I'm not talking about Tinok Shenishba, which is a halachic principle of a person who never even knew the difference. I'm not talking about, we're talking in general terms right now. Yesh shedim shem shel Yehudim. There are shedim, there are demons that are Jewish or belong to the Jewish people. Shem datama besisiti betoch havaya yehudit. Okay, they're B'ki'im b'Torah. They're the ones that get us to do things we shouldn't do, that are mutar to do, but we have to do them the right way. I'm not going to spend any time on this slide because I want to get to the next ones here. We talked about three things. We talked about the chibut hakever, the kaf hakela, and Gehinnom. So what I want to do is to read to you something that's not on your screen. Why will it end in 10 minutes? I have the sign in. What time is it now? Oh gosh. Okay, well, we'll have to finish. I'll have to figure out why, because I signed in properly on my extended account. Interesting. Does that note show up on your screen or only on my screen? You don't see it. Okay, it says I will. Okay, I'll deal with that later. So it means I have 10 minutes left to finish this class. It'll be 5 minutes early. I'll figure it out for the next time. Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so I'm going to read something to you that you don't have in front of you. This is Rav Ginsburg. He wrote a book called El Tocha Tanya, which is a pretty straightforward understanding of Tanya, description, explanation. He says, talks about chibut hakever. What does chibut hakever mean? He tells us like this. After the neshama leaves the person's body, haguf nirkav, the body disintegrates. That's not the right word. Decomposes. We know that a person, their body decomposes in the ground. How does that happen? It doesn't just fall apart. It's, there are things within the ground. You don't need to be too specific and too gross, but things that attack the body. There is some form of pain, so to speak, from that. Not in a physical sense, because the person's dead. But there is pain to the person from that. הרי עונשי התורה אינם חס ושלום עונש לשם עונש, or לשם נקמה, וכדומה. When Hashem punishes, Hashem's not giving that as an onesh. That's why I said it's in quotes. It's not an onesh to punish, just stamp to punish. And it's not nikama. It's not, oh, you did this, you didn't do this. Boom, this is what's going to happen to you. It is only for the purpose of the benefit of the person. How? How is this benefit of the person? Since the person became so filthy from the gimel klipot hatmeot, he has to wash out that dirt. Why? You want to go to Gan Eden. You want to stand before Hashem and be able to nehenem miziva shechina and to have a benefit from the Shechina, from the divine presence. You don't come before Hashem dirty, neither in a physical sense, which is why we have tahara after a person dies, nor in the spiritual sense. So the first thing we have to do is lenakoto taharo al de chibuta kever. That's the lowest level, so to speak, that a person will have to go through. And then there's more. The second one is called the kafakela. I'm going to read to you, if I don't run out of time, I'm going to read to you what Rav Steinsaltz says and what Rav Ginsburg says. Starting over here where it says, Kishem shahaguf tzarich. Kishem shahaguf tzarich lechibuta kever lenakoto uletaro. Just like the physical body. Remember, we said that this rima v'toleah, the things that attack the body in the kever, that's physical. It's the physical body of a person that's become decaying. Just like it has to do that to letaher the person, to purify them, because it was like this go between this ma'abar, this crossover to tuma, and that can't come before God. So too the neshama has to go through something. Remember, we've talked about since day one that we are made up of two parts. We have the physical and the spiritual. We are our bodies, and we also have a neshama. We have let me just plug this in here. It's all these new things I'm getting used to here. Just a minute. Sorry. I can find out what it's plugged in. Here. Okay. I'll get used to it. We know we have a body, we know of a neshama. We've talked extensively about a neshama. We have the neshama, the nefesh habahamit, the nefesh elokit, and all these other things we didn't talk about. So on the one hand, we talked about how we are able to have this cleansing take place for us physically. But what about spiritually? So that's the kaf hakela. What is it? Inyana shel kaf hakela nizkar b'mikra b'divrei Abigail David. First of all, where does the word come from? It comes from Sefer Shmuel Aleph, where it says, "V'hayta nefesh Adoni tzrura b'tzrora chayim et Hashem Elokecha et nefesh oivecha yikalena betoch kaf hakela." V'nidrash b'Gemara, and it explains in the Gemara as follows: Al nishmatam shel rishayim, that regarding the neshama of rishayim, of evil people, shehein zomemot v'holchot. What is it they do? They walk. U'malach echad omed b'sof ha'olam. One angel stands at the end of the universe. And another angel stands at the other edge of the universe. And they play catch. They throw the neshama back and forth and back and forth. What? What is that? First of all, how's that cleanse the neshama? In what way in the world does that cleanse the neshama? So we're going to see that soon. He gives his opinion on what he says. And Rav Ginsburg gives a different approach. And if I don't run out of time, we'll hear at least Rav Steinsaltz. It's explained in other places. It is the repetitious vision of the neshama seeing over and over and over their life. This, by the way, to me, I've said this a long time ago in this class, this is not what Rav Ginsburg is going to say, but this is what he's going to say, is that it's kind of like seeing a movie of your life. Okay, so big deal. The big deal is it's every second of your life, of every action, every thought, every speech, and it's right there You have a jury, so to speak, sitting with you in front of God. Every single thing you ever thought, ever said, ever did, it's all going to be on the screen. Something like this we have in this world. Many people who have mental health issues have them as a result of their past. Oh, God forbid, person who was a Holocaust survivor, a person who went through a war, a person who was in trauma, we know that they have these machalot nafshiot, the emotional trauma that stays with them. It plays over in their minds over and over. Person who had what used to be called shell shock and now PTSD, maybe here's a car tire blowout or backfire of a car, instantly they're back at that moment on the battlefield. And he's saying this is what we will feel, this person's neshama will feel in Olam Haba. Our ability to forget the past, of the trauma, at least the moment, that feeling, is actually a protective measure. It helps us move into the future. What is the Kaf HaKela do? It's a psychological thing according to how Rav Steinsaltz reads it. The way that Rav Ginsburg does it is it's similar. It's also a psychological, but it's a different approach. Now, because this is set up to end in just about 1 minute, I just want to tell you that what the plan is. Bezrat Hashem, we're going to continue next week with Rav Ginsburg exactly at this point. And then in the meantime, I hope to figure out why I'm getting cut off like a regular normal Zoom account when I have a full account. So in the meantime, before I get cut off, allow me to say have a good evening, have a good day tomorrow, and blessings upon all of you. And it is so great to be home. Be well.
Yesher koach.
Thank you very
so
much.
much.
Besimcha.